Willowridge High was a place of quiet rules and loud consequences. If you knew your place, you were safe. If you didn't, you learned quickly. Leo Reyes had spent years learning. He walked the halls like a ghost. Never too fast, never too slow, never making eye contact with the wrong people. It was how you survived. His mother, exhausted from long shifts at the hospital, had always told him, "Stay out of trouble, Leo, just get through school." But his grandfather, Mateo Reyes, an old fighter who never backed down from a challenge, had different advice. "Son, there's a day when every man has to decide who he is. Don't let someone else make that choice for you." Leo had never thought that day would come so soon. At Willowridge, power wasn't just about strength, it was about status. And Ryan Calloway had both. The son of a wealthy businessman, he moved through the school like he owned it. Because in many ways, he did. Teachers turned a blind eye. Students fell in line. Nobody challenged Ryan unless they wanted to regret it. Leo had always been careful. But his little sister, Camilla, still had hope in her eyes. At 12, she hadn't yet learned that some people could do whatever they wanted and never face the consequences. It started small, a few rude comments, a laugh when she walked by, a casual trip in the hallway. Leo told her to ignore it. Just keep walking. But then Ryan took it further. A missing lunch, torn notebooks, words whispered just loud enough to be heard. Camilla tried to act like it didn't matter. But Leo saw the shift. The hesitation before she stepped into school. The way her hands curled into fists when she heard Ryan's name. Then, one afternoon, it went too far. Leo was heading home when he heard it, sharp, mocking laughter from the alley behind the old gas station. His stomach dropped. He turned the corner, and there she was, Camilla, cornered against the brick wall. Her bag held above her head by Ryan. His friends stood around him, waiting, watching. "Just say it," Ryan mused, tossing her bag between his hands. "Say you know your place, and maybe I'll let you go." Camilla squared her shoulders. "I don't owe you anything." Ryan smirked. Wrong answer. He stepped closer. Leo moved before he could think. In seconds, he was between them, grabbing Ryan's wrist mid-motion. Silence. Ryan raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering across his face. "And here I thought you knew how to mind your business, Reyes." Leo's voice was steady. "That's my sister." Ryan tilted his head. "And what are you gonna do about it?" Leo didn't answer. He just held his ground. Ryan held his gaze, then slowly yanked his arm free. "Relax, we were just playing." Leo looked at Camilla. She was shaken but still standing. That was enough. He exhaled, unclenched his fists, took a step back. "We're done here." Ryan laughed softly. "Oh, you think so?" Leo said nothing. He turned, took Camilla's hand, and walked away. Behind them, Ryan's voice rang out, dripping with mockery. "You're gonna wish you hadn't done that, Reyes." Leo kept walking, but deep in his gut, he knew this wasn't over. Ryan had made a mistake. He thought Leo was just another kid who would back down. He had no idea what was coming. Leo sat on the steps of his grandfather's shop, the scent of motor oil and old leather thick in the air. Mateo Reyes worked quietly under the hood of a rusted pickup, humming an old tune, his hands moving with the ease of a man who had done this his whole life. Leo hadn't said a word since he got home. He didn't need to. Mateo finally wiped his hands on a rag and tossed it aside. "Something's eating at you, kid." Leo exhaled through his nose. "It's nothing." Mateo scoffed. "Yeah? Well, nothing doesn't make a man look like he's got a war raging inside his head." He leaned against the truck, watching Leo with knowing eyes. Leo clenched his fists. The words felt heavy, but they came out anyway. "Ryan Calloway's been messing with Camilla." Mateo's expression didn't change. And I didn't do anything." Mateo nodded slowly. "So what's worse, the fact that he did it? Or the fact that you let it happen?" Leo's jaw tightened. "What was I supposed to do? If I hit him, I'd be the one getting in trouble." Mateo studied him for a long moment. "You're not wrong, but trouble's coming either way. Mijo, the real question is, what kind of trouble are you willing to face?" Leo didn't have an answer. Not yet. The next morning, Leo walked into school expecting the stares, the whispers. He wasn't disappointed. Students exchanged glances as he passed. Some curious, others amused. Ryan's circle sat in their usual spot near the lockers, laughing like nothing had changed. Ryan himself leaned against the wall. arms crossed, eyes locking onto Leo like a predator sizing up its prey. Leo ignored him. He had almost made it to class when a foot shot out in front of him. He barely caught himself before he hit the ground. Laughter rippled through the hallway. "What's the matter, Reyes?" Ryan drawled. "Feet not working today?" Leo straightened, brushing dust off his jeans. "You're still trying?" he asked. Voice even. Ryan smirked. "Gotta remind everyone who's in charge around here." Leo glanced around. Students had gathered, waiting for the show. He could feel the heat of their eyes on him. Ryan stepped closer, voice dropping just low enough for only Leo to hear. "You made me look weak, Reyes. That's a problem." Leo held his gaze. "Maybe you were weak to begin with." For a second, Ryan's smirk faltered. Then he shoved Leo. Not hard, but enough to make a point. The hallway fell silent. Leo could feel the weight of expectation in the air. He didn't react. Ryan huffed a laugh. "That's what I thought." Leo let him turn away. Let him walk 2 steps. Then he spoke. "If you were really in charge, you wouldn't have to keep proving it." Ryan stopped. The hallway tensed. He turned back, slow, eyes flashing. "What did you just say?" Leo shrugged. "You heard me." Ryan's jaw clenched. Leo saw the moment he decided. Ryan swung, but Leo had been ready. He sidestepped easily, and Ryan's fist cut through empty air. The second Ryan stumbled, Leo stepped in, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the lockers with just enough force to make an impact. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Leo leaned in, voice low. "This is the last time you touch my sister." Ryan blinked, shocked. For once, he had no comeback. Leo let him go and stepped back. He didn't wait for Ryan to react. He just walked away. And this time, nobody laughed. Leo should have felt victorious. He had humiliated Ryan Calloway in front of the entire school. Something nobody had ever done. The hallway had been silent when he walked away. The usual laughter and whispers replaced by something else. Respect. Or maybe just shock. Either way, it should have felt like a win. But it didn't. Not when he knew how this worked. People like Ryan didn't lose. They just waited. That night, Leo sat on the roof of his grandfather's garage, watching the stars blink against the dark sky. Mateo climbed up a few minutes later, sitting down beside him with 2 cans of soda. "Heard you made a scene today," Mateo said, cracking one open. Leo exhaled. "It won't change anything." Mateo took a sip. Maybe not, but it got their attention. Didn't it? Leo frowned. "Ryan's not done with me." Mateo smirked. "Of course not. He's used to getting his way. And now you've made him bleed, figuratively speaking. So what do I do?" Mateo was quiet for a moment. "You're asking the wrong question, kid. It's not about what you do next. It's about how far you're willing to go." Leo didn't answer. Because he didn't know. The next day, Leo felt the shift before he even stepped into school. Ryan's people were watching him. Not with their usual amusement, but with something colder, calculating. Leo didn't react. He made it through the morning without incident. But he knew it was coming. The storm was waiting for the right moment. And it arrived at lunch. Leo was walking toward the vending machines near the back of the cafeteria when a voice called out, "Reyes." He turned. Ryan stood with his usual group. But there was something different. Something more deliberate. Leo didn't move, didn't speak. Ryan smiled, slow and easy, as if nothing had happened. "I've been thinking, maybe we got off on the wrong foot." Leo folded his arms. "That right?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, so I figured, let's settle this like men. No teachers, no audience, just us. Tonight, the old construction site, past the track field." Leo didn't blink. He knew exactly what this was. Ryan wanted revenge, but he wanted to control the setting. No eyes, no proof. Leo wasn't stupid, but he was also tired of running. "Fine," he said. Ryan's grin widened. "Good, try not to chicken out." Leo turned and walked away. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He was just done. Done letting Ryan decide how this ended. This time, Leo was choosing the battlefield. And Ryan had no idea what was coming. The construction site loomed ahead. Skeletal beams and half-finished concrete walls casting long shadows under the flickering streetlights. It had been abandoned for years. A forgotten project that now served as the perfect battleground. Leo stepped through the chain-link fence. The cool night air settling around him. The gravel crunched under his boots. He wasn't surprised to find that he wasn't alone. Ryan was already there, standing near a stack of cinder blocks, his hands in his pockets, his usual smirk firmly in place. But Leo didn't just see Ryan. He saw the others. 3 of them, standing in the shadows. So this wasn't a fight. It was an ambush. Leo exhaled slowly. He should have expected this. Took you long enough, Ryan said, stepping forward. Thought you might have changed your mind. Leo rolled his shoulders, keeping his stance loose. Didn't think you'd need backup. Ryan chuckled. Backup? Nah, just making sure things go the way they should. One of his guys, Mason, stepped into the light, cracking his knuckles. Let's be real, Reyes. You embarrassed Ryan. That's not something we let slide. Leo's pulse stayed steady. So what? 4-on-1? Ryan shrugged. You could have walked away, Reyes, but you wanted to be a hero. Leo nodded slowly, taking in their positions. They were spaced out just enough to block his exits, but not close enough to strike immediately. And what happens after you jump me? Leo asked. You think that fixes anything? Ryan smirked. It fixes my problem. Leo's grip tightened at his sides. He wasn't winning this fight. At least, not in the way they expected. All right, Leo said. Let's get this over with. He took a step forward. Then the floodlights came on. The entire site exploded in light, turning night into day. Ryan and his crew flinched, eyes squeezing shut. Leo didn't. He already knew what was coming. A voice rang out from behind the fence. That's enough. Ryan's head snapped toward the sound. From the darkness, figures emerged. Not just one, not just 2. Half the school. Eric Jennings, Maya Green, Jordan Lopez, dozens of others. Kids who had been on the receiving end of Ryan's power trip. Kids who had learned to be afraid, until now. Maya held up her phone. Smile. Ryan, you're on camera. Ryan's smirk vanished. Leo folded his arms. You thought I'd walk in here alone? Ryan's fists clenched. You set me up. No, Leo said calmly. You set yourself up. The air around them shifted. Ryan's guys looked at each other, suddenly unsure. This was never just about me. Leo continued. It was about every single person you pushed around. And now? Now everyone sees you for what you really are. Ryan's breathing grew shallow. Maya turned her phone, showing the live stream feed. Hundreds of comments poured in. Ryan's reign was over. And he knew it. He turned, eyes burning. This isn't over. Reyes. Leo exhaled. Yeah, Ryan, it is. Ryan stared for a long moment. Then he turned and walked into the night. His guys hesitated, then followed. Leo didn't watch them go. He turned to the crowd behind him. The ones who had finally stepped into the light. For the first time, they weren't just survivors. They were something more. They were free. The video spread like wildfire. By the time Leo got home that night, his phone was flooded with messages. Some from people he barely knew, students who had always stayed quiet. Now suddenly reaching out. Others were from those who had been watching from the sidelines, too scared to act before. And then there were the threats. Ryan wasn't the type to let something like this go. But Leo wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, Willow Ridge High was different. The second Leo walked through the doors, the energy had shifted. Whispers followed him down the hallway. But they weren't mocking. They weren't amused. They were waiting. For the first time, Ryan wasn't in school. His absence said more than words ever could. Eric caught up with Leo near the lockers, shaking his head in disbelief. You realize what you just did, right? Leo exhaled. Not really. Eric grinned. You changed the rules. Man, people like Ryan? They don't get embarrassed. They don't lose. And you just made him look powerless in front of everyone. Leo leaned against the lockers, crossing his arms. Yeah? Then why do I feel like this isn't over? Eric's smile faded slightly. Because it's not. But for once, he's the one running. And that counts for something. Leo didn't reply. Because deep down, he knew Ryan Calloway wasn't done. Not yet. Lunch was quieter than usual. Leo had never been the type to sit with a big crowd. But today, his usual spot in the back of the cafeteria wasn't as empty as it used to be. Maya and Jordan sat across from him. Eric took the seat next to him. They didn't say much, but they didn't have to. For the first time, Leo wasn't alone. Then, as if the universe couldn't let him breathe, the intercom crackled to life. Leo Reyes, please report to the principal's office immediately. Maya muttered under her breath. Here we go. Leo pushed his tray aside and stood. Eric frowned. You need backup? Leo smirked slightly. If I do, you'll know. Principal Ford's office was colder than usual. Leo had been here before. Detention for minor things. Warnings for skipping class. But this was different. Because Ryan Calloway's father was here. Nathan Calloway sat in one of the chairs. His suit crisp. His expression unreadable. Principal Ford folded his hands on his desk, clearing his throat. Leo, have a seat. Leo remained standing. Ford sighed. Do you know why you're here? Leo glanced at Calloway Sr. before answering. I have a guess. Nathan Calloway finally spoke, his voice smooth, controlled. You seem to think you've accomplished something. Mr. Reyes. Leo didn't flinch. I don't think anything. I just showed people the truth. Calloway's lips twitched into something resembling a smile. Truth is subjective. Son, what you've done, it's reckless, dangerous. Do you really think a few videos change anything? Leo's jaw clenched. They already have. Ford shifted in his seat. Leo, your actions have caused quite the stir. We need to be sure this doesn't escalate further. Leo laughed, shaking his head. You mean you need to make sure Ryan doesn't face any real consequences? Calloway's gaze darkened. Watch yourself, boy. Leo met his eyes without hesitation. For the first time, he wasn't the one afraid in this room. Ford cleared his throat again. Leo, you're suspended until further notice. We'll be reviewing the situation carefully. But for now, I think it's best if you take some time off. Leo clenched his fists. Not because he was surprised. Because he saw it coming. And what about Ryan? He asked. Ford hesitated. Calloway spoke instead. My son will be handling things privately. Leo huffed a quiet laugh. Of course he will. Ford exhaled heavily. That's all. Leo, go home. Leo turned to leave, but before he stepped out, he paused at the door. You can try to protect him, he said without turning around. But it won't change what people saw. He walked out, and for the first time, he felt free. Leo stepped out of the principal's office into the silent hallway. His suspension wasn't a surprise. He had seen it coming the moment he walked into that office and saw Nathan Calloway sitting there. A man used to getting his way. But what Ford and Calloway didn't understand was that this wasn't just about Leo anymore. They couldn't silence everyone. He walked toward the front doors, knowing that once he stepped outside, he wouldn't be coming back for a while. Students watched as he passed, some whispering, others staring with something close to admiration. It wasn't over. Not yet. The wind was sharp against his skin as he stepped into the parking lot. His mind was running through everything that had happened, everything that would come next. He wasn't stupid. Ryan wasn't going to let this slide. Leo had embarrassed him, stripped away the power he had held for so long. There would be a response. He just didn't know when. But then, as if the universe wanted to answer his question immediately, a sleek black car pulled up near the sidewalk. Leo slowed his steps. The window rolled down. Nathan Calloway sat in the driver's seat, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the edge of the window. His expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. Get in. Leo didn't move. I'm good right here. Nathan exhaled, his patience wearing thin. This isn't a request, son. Leo clenched his jaw. Every instinct in his body told him not to get in that car. But he also knew what refusing meant. It meant Calloway would keep coming. And right now, Leo needed to know exactly how far this man was willing to go. So he got in. The door shut with a quiet click. The car pulled away from the school, gliding through the streets in heavy silence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Calloway finally broke the quiet. You're a smart kid, smarter than I gave you credit for. Leo stared out the window, his voice flat. And yet, here we are. A slow smile curled at the edge of Calloway's lips. Yes, here we are. He turned onto a side street, away from the main roads, into a quieter part of town. The buildings were older here, some abandoned, some barely standing. Leo tensed. I assume you know why we're having this conversation. Calloway's tone was casual, but there was steel underneath it. Leo finally turned to look at him. Because your son can't handle losing? Calloway's smile didn't falter. Because you don't understand the world you're playing in. He slowed the car to a stop near an empty lot. Then he turned to face Leo fully. You think what you did was justice? It was a spectacle, a distraction, but it won't change anything. Leo's fingers curled into fists. It already has. Calloway studied him for a moment, then sighed, shaking his head. You're young. You think the world plays by rules. But let me explain something to you. Leo. His voice dropped lower. The world belongs to people like me. People who understand how to bend it. You're an inconvenience. And inconveniences? He leaned in slightly. They get dealt with. Leo held his gaze, unflinching. So that's your plan? Threaten me into silence? Calloway tilted his head. Threaten? He chuckled. No, Leo. This is just a warning. The weight of his words settled in the air between them. A choice. A line in the sand. Leo had expected this. Expected fear. But instead, something else took root inside him. Clarity. I'm not scared of you. Calloway's expression remained unreadable. Then he nodded once, as if Leo had confirmed something he already suspected. That's the problem. The car door unlocked. Leo didn't hesitate. He pushed it open, stepping out into the night air. Calloway didn't drive away immediately. He let the silence stretch between them. Then, before pulling off, he spoke one last time. Be careful, Leo. Not everyone gets a second warning. The car disappeared into the darkness. Leo stood there, his heartbeat steady. Ryan had played his game. Now it was Leo's turn. And he wasn't backing down. Leo watched the black car disappear into the night, its taillights fading like dying embers. The wind was cold against his face, but his blood ran hot. Nathan Calloway had made his move. Now it was Leo's turn. He walked home in silence, letting the night wrap around him. The weight of everything pressed heavy on his chest. But beneath it, there was something steadier, determination. Calloway thought threats would scare him. He thought Leo was just another kid who could be pushed back into place. He was wrong. When Leo finally reached the garage, his grandfather was waiting on the porch, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. Mateo Reyes had seen enough in his lifetime to recognize the storm brewing in his grandson's eyes. Who was it? Mateo asked, voice calm but firm. Leo didn't bother lying. Ryan's father. Mateo exhaled slowly. He crushed the cigarette against the porch railing, watching the embers flicker out. And he thinks this is over. Mateo studied him. Then, with a slow nod, he stood. Then it's time we remind him otherwise. By morning, the video had reached the local news. It was no longer just a school scandal. It was a story people were paying attention to. Leo sat on his bed, scrolling through the newsfeed, reading headlines he never expected to see. Power struggle at Willowridge High. Students speak out against bullying. Ryan Calloway's school reigned challenged and caught on camera. The truth behind the video. What really happened at the construction site? The comments were even louder. People outside the school were talking about it now. Parents, teachers, journalists. Leo knew what this meant. He had shifted the fight. Now it wasn't just between him and Ryan. It was bigger. At school, the tension was suffocating. Leo walked through the halls, feeling the weight of every stare. Some students looked at him like a hero, others like a ticking time bomb. Ryan was back, but he wasn't the same. He sat at his usual spot, his posture rigid, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. His friends were still there, but they weren't laughing. They were watching, waiting. Leo stopped at his locker, pretending not to notice when Ryan stood and started walking toward him. The hallway went dead silent. Ryan stopped a few feet away, arms crossed. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something new. Not anger. Desperation. You think you won? Ryan's voice was quiet but sharp. Leo shut his locker. I think people finally see you for what you are. Ryan smirked, but it was hollow. That's cute, but you don't get it. Do you? Leo tilted his head. Enlighten me. Ryan leaned in slightly. My father doesn't lose. Leo held his gaze. Neither do I. Ryan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You don't understand what you've done. Reyes, you're playing a game you can't win. Leo stepped forward. No, I just stopped playing by your rules. A flicker of doubt crossed Ryan's face. For the first time, Leo saw it. Fear. Ryan turned away, pushing past the crowd, leaving Leo standing in the center of it all. The shift was happening, and there was no turning back. Ryan Calloway was still standing. Even after everything, he refused to believe that he had lost. Leo could see it in the way Ryan walked through the school, his smirk forced. His back straight, his fists clenched just tight enough to keep them from shaking. He still thought this was a game. Still thought he could win. That's why he did something stupid. Something that no one, not even his father, could cover up. It started with anger. Ryan had been boiling since the video at the construction site. His father had assured him that things would blow over. That the Callaway name still carried weight. That they could fix it. But then, one by one, the walls closed in. More students spoke up. More parents called the school. Teachers started watching him, not out of fear, but scrutiny. Nathan Callaway worked behind the scenes, pulling strings, making calls, but for the first time in his life, it wasn't working. Ryan could feel the world slipping out of his grasp, and it made him reckless. That's why he went after Eric Jennings. It happened in the parking lot after school. Ryan and his friends had been waiting, eyes dark, shoulders tense. They had no plan, just anger, just frustration, just the need to hurt someone. Eric had been laughing with Maya when they cornered him. "You're real brave online, Jennings." Ryan's voice was low, mocking. Eric's expression barely changed. "You're real brave in groups, Callaway." Maya grabbed Eric's arm. "Let's go." Ryan shoved him. It wasn't hard, but it didn't have to be. It was a message. Eric stumbled back, catching himself against a car. His eyes flashed with something cold. "Do it," he said. "Come on, Ryan, do it." Ryan did. He swung. It was messy, wild, unplanned. His fist cracked against Eric's jaw. And for a moment, there was silence. Then Eric wiped the blood from his lip and smiled. "Thanks, man." Ryan blinked. "What?" Eric lifted his phone. It had been recording the whole time. Maya had been recording too. So had half the students in the lot. Ryan's face went pale. "You're done." Eric's voice was almost amused. "And this time? Your daddy can't save you." Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He turned, frantic, looking at his friends. They were already stepping away. Not laughing, not backing him up, just leaving. By the time Ryan got home, the video had already gone viral. Not just in the school, not just in the town. Everywhere. Wealthy student assaults peer in broad daylight. Father tries to cover it up. Ryan Callaway finally caught, but will he face justice? Entitled "Rich Kid Learns the Hard Way." The internet was ruthless. Ryan's name was everywhere, and for the first time in his life, he had no control over it. Nathan Callaway came home late that night, his face tight with barely restrained fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was sharp enough to cut. Ryan stood in the middle of the living room, stiff, panicked. "Dad, shut up." Ryan's mouth snapped shut. Nathan threw his coat onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "The school called. The board called. The company called. Sponsors are pulling their deals. Investors are walking away. You didn't just ruin yourself, Ryan." He turned, eyes dark. "You ruined me." Ryan's breath hitched. "They'll forget. The internet. The internet doesn't forget." Nathan's voice was like ice. "And neither do people who have money to lose." Ryan had never seen his father like this. Nathan Callaway was a man who fixed things, who buried things. But now? He looked like a man watching his entire empire crumble. "They expelled you." Nathan's voice was hollow. Ryan felt like the ground had dropped beneath him. "No, they can't." "They did." Nathan let the silence settle. Then he laughed. But it wasn't amused. It wasn't proud. It was empty. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked. Ryan swallowed hard. Nathan took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I should have let Leo Reyes beat you." Ryan flinched. His father's eyes burned into him. At least then, it would have been a fair fight. Ryan felt small. For the first time in his entire life, he felt powerless. Nathan grabbed his coat, shaking his head. "You lost, Ryan. And now? You get to live with it." Then he walked out. Ryan just stood there, silent, alone, afraid. At school, Leo sat on the front steps, watching students scroll through their phones, shaking their heads at the newest headline. Ryan Callaway was gone, not just from school, from everything. Maya sat down next to him, nudging his arm. "Crazy how fast people fall." "Huh?" Leo exhaled. "Not crazy, just overdue." Eric smirked, tossing his phone to Leo. "The internet's calling it the Callaway collapse." "Catchy, huh?" Leo laughed, shaking his head. Camilla walked up, arms crossed. "So, it's really over?" Leo met her gaze. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he had to keep fighting. Yeah, it's over. And this time, Ryan Calloway was never coming back.